Yep. Yeah, I'm going to roll between like here and about here. Okay. You're good? Okay, let's go ahead and start. So, my name is Joseph Perini. I'm Director of Technical Services for PSC. PSC is a QSA company. In other words, we work in the PCI regulatory compliance, and I run the team of penetration testers. There's about 10 of us at PSC, as well as working with the forensic group. Now, our pen testers work towards highly complex environments. So we're typically inside of enterprises, level 1 clients with hundreds of servers and thousands of endpoints and usually hundreds of VLANs. In fact, 2 of them are here today, and they'll be talking tomorrow on the hunting high-value targets in corporate environments. And that should be a really good talk if you get a chance to do it, because it'll give you scenarios that we're likely to see as penetration testers at this level. Now, in addition to being the director, I'm also a published vulnerability researcher, and I spend about 20% of my time in the field as well. I get to travel all over the world hacking networks and speaking to clients, and I've been able to speak at the PCI council meetings and in front of card brands all over the world. Now, if I'm honest, I'm not as good as those guys. I'm not as good as the rest of my team, and I don't have to be because I'm the manager. I just get to hire and encourage really good pen testers. And that's what we're talking about today, is how do you make that break from being a guy that really loves pen testing and wants to do it as a job? How do you get that big break? How do you go from CTF to hacking the enterprise? Do you have the necessary skills? Where do you get them if you don't? And then what are the mistakes that new guys in the field typically make? So can I get a show of hands real quick? How many of you are already pen testers? Cool. And how many of you want to be pen testers? And yeah, sure, Patrick. And how many of you manage pen testers? Anybody in here in a management role? Okay, cool. Then we won't discuss that slide. All right, so some of you might be currently sysadmins, right? Or you're developers, or you've had exposure to red teams, and you're thinking, I really want to do this. This is something that I love. I'm already doing capture the flags. You may be involved in the room next door and having a lot of fun with it, and you want to make that jump to the professional pen tester. So, what is a pen test? Let's talk about that first, because there's a lot of different descriptions and everybody needs to kind of get a feel for what that looks like. And a pen test can be roughly defined as the practice of testing computer systems with the following steps. You do discovery, you do enumeration, you do vulnerability assessment, and then you do exploitation. Now, at PSC, we take exploitation to the next step. We take what we've exploited, we determine what position we're in, and then we move laterally and vertically. We go for post-exploitation. It's an extra step that I don't see in a lot of pen test reports. So, if this is all I need to know as a pen tester, I should be pretty well set, right? I mean, you can go out, you can find the resources for these sort of things. I mean, discovery and enumeration's got to be Nmap and Nessus, and you can figure out the rest of it, right? Not quite. So, these are the real steps of a pen test. The first, it always starts, and it doesn't matter if you're a consultant or if you're working inside of an organization, there's always scoping the RFP. Somebody's come to you and said, we want to do a pen test. And you say, okay, let's talk about what your objectives are, and let's talk about the resources and what we're going to need to put together. Then you've got to come back and write the proposal. Now, you've got to deliver this to the client, so you've got to outline what your methodology is and what your expertise is, and you've got to be able to provide this to the third party. And again, it doesn't matter if this is independent consultant or you're having to bring this to management internally, there's still some concept of writing the proposal. Then there's the sales close, which is simple if you're a consultant, you know how to do that. And if you're inside, you still have to sell it to somebody, because there's somebody in the organization that's going to be unclear on why they have to do it and what needs to be done. And then, once you've sold it, congratulations, you start with the kickoff meeting. And as a consultant, you're going to participate in what it takes to do the tests, setting up the logistics, agreeing on the rules of engagement, making sure that we understand, we all agree on what is success criteria. Success criteria is the point at which you stop. At what point are we done with the pen test? And then, when you've agreed to all of that, there's the actual test. And now you can start going through the discovery, the enumeration, the vulnerability assessment, exploitation, and post-exploitation. And you're done with the pen test. Now, you've got to write the report. And if this is an internal test as opposed to a consultant, you're still going to have to write it up for somebody. Then you're going to have to deliver that report. And it may be a delivery over a phone, it might be in person, you may have to go through some PowerPoint presentation, but you're going to have to explain to somebody what the findings are, articulate what those risks are, and then give them some idea of how to fix it. And more than likely, the last step in the pen test is helping them fix things. They're going to come back to you and say, well, we understand what NBNS is, but we don't know how to fix it. We're having a hard time getting it all resolved, or we don't know what to do about this finding of inadequate segmentation. What are we supposed to do with that? So again, you're going to have to work with the either internal asset or with the client to make sure that your pen test and all of the steps are carefully and properly articulated. Now, there are different types of pen testers. You may be currently, and I hope no one in the room is the script kiddie. The script kiddie, we all know, is the guy in the forum who's begging us to teach him how to hack Facebook. And he doesn't have any understanding of the underlying technology or the consequences of what he's doing. He's got some script off of wherever, and he saw a YouTube video. You know that guy that just got busted for hacking into some government agency, learned about it off of YouTube, did it, and then filmed himself hacking and posted online. Well, he got busted because that's his mentality. He just doesn't understand what's going on. Now, the junior pen tester is the guy that knows the tools and has an understanding of the underlying technology. What they don't have, maybe, is exposure to all the different enterprises or technologies. Maybe they're really experienced at CTF, but they've never sat in an environment where there are, 100 assets and they're having to pivot through different VLANs to get to wherever their target systems are. They've never experienced that, but they're pretty good, they've got a good understanding, and they're fairly careful. Now, the mid-range pen tester, these are the guys I love because they're seasoned, they know the tool, they might know how to do SQL injection manually, but they use all the tools to speed things up, so SQL map's easy. They're qualified to be a team leader, and they're going to be successful as a consultant or internally within an organization. Now, the difference between a mid-range pen tester and a senior pen tester, in my mind, is this. The senior pen tester is someone who's writing new tools and techniques and researching vulnerabilities and mentoring other team members. That's really what makes you senior and above just everybody else. Now, not everybody is willing to go through the steps it takes to go from script kiddie to senior pen tester. I don't know if you saw this the other day on Reddit's hacking. Somebody was looking for damn help. Now, he was in the hacking subreddit, and he was having a real problem because everybody was telling him stuff to do that was totally useless shit, and the tutorials that he was finding were all crappy, and he couldn't figure out how to do it. He just needed some help, and somebody needed to tell him how to do it. Well, this is probably an extreme example, but it's not an uncommon attitude where we want to get to the end as quickly as possible. We want to kind of cut out the middle, and you're not likely to start hacking by jumping right in. You probably need to do something else in the industry first, right? You got to be a developer, be a sysadmin. Do something so that you can get exposure to the technologies and the programs and the applications that you're eventually going to have to break into. It's not wasted time or experience, and this background will go a long way. All right, so let's talk about the skills you need to have. So, basic computer skills. And I say basic is probably, you should have broad computer skills. You should be an expert in at least one operating system. But you need to be operating system agnostic. You may love Linux all day long and think everything else sucks. You might like the Mac and think everything else is just garbage. But the fact of the matter is the enterprise loves Windows. So you better know it. And you better know how they set it up and how they use it in the enterprise. So that means Active Directory, that means Exchange, that might mean SharePoint, and a lot of other different Windows systems. You may even, at some point, have exposure to mainframes. You know, unfortunately, we can't grab a mainframe, throw it in a lab at home, and hack away at it. But at some point, if you do get the chance, you can do it slowly and carefully and expose yourself to that sort of thing. You'll need to understand what's going on at a network level. TCP v4 and v6. You're going to have to be able to open up Wireshark and understand what's going on, make heads or tails of the output, and understand the most common networking protocols. Scripting skills, do you need to have it? No. Do you want to have it? Yeah. It makes your life a lot easier. You can automate, you can get a lot more done in the same amount of time if you can script in Bash or in Windows Batch. You're going to need to know the databases. If you're looking at SQL injection, you have to know how those back-end databases are working. So MS SQL, MySQL, Postgre, Oracle, get some exposure to it. Internet programming skills like HTML, Net, Java, JSON, it's all there. Cold Fusion, you've got to get some exposure to it. Fortunately, again, all of this is easy to get our hands on and bring down. You'll need more advanced programming skills. There's always the argument of, should I learn Python, or is Perl better, or is Ruby better than everything? And I don't care what you decide to do, because, again, their flexibility is a little bit different. But once you learn one, it'll make the others easier. And then wireless skills. You're going to have to understand how, if you have not cracked a WEP wireless by now, why not? I mean, even as an entry-level person, that's one of the easiest things to do. And that'll be your next step to working towards WPA2 or WPA or WPA2 Enterprise. Now, how do you know that you've got enough in terms of skill set to be able to do the job? Well, I'm going to share something with you. I have these skill matrix spreadsheets that I use with my guys when I hire them. And I provide them to them so they can go through and kind of answer how they know the different tools. And I've broken up the spreadsheets based on the steps of a pen test for both the internal and the external. And they can answer the questions, do I know discovery and enumeration as well as I should? Am I an expert in this or this tool? And it gives me an idea as the manager of where I can use them in an engagement. And it also gives them, as the employee, an opportunity to say, okay, well, you know what, I'm a little weak in this. Maybe I need to improve my skill set. So I'm sharing these with you now. They're up on pentest.link, and then I'll move them over to my GitHub, and you can download these and take a peek and see if you can use them. Now, if you can add stuff to this, and you can improve upon these spreadsheets, by all means, let me know, because I'd be interested in that feedback. Now, the mechanics of being a pen tester, learning the tools and the programs and the applications, fortunately, is easy to get our hands on. It's all over the net. And it doesn't cost anything. Most of the resources that are available on the internet are free, and everything we need to know, we can usually get our hands on. I've gone ahead and put together a web page because people keep asking me, well, how do I become a pen tester? So I threw this together, and it's available for you, again, at pentestertips.gettingstarted.html. And you can go here and take a look at it. And it's got resources ranging from, live CD distributions to pen test labs, different vulnerable applications that you can tear apart, methodologies, and so on and so forth. Things that you can use at home to practice and fill in wherever you might have some weak spots. Now, one of the things I'd like to make a point here is, and we can use me as an example, you can learn all of this. Now, I don't program. Is it because programming is hard? No. It's because I'm frankly not willing to put the time and energy into learning how to program. I haven't had to, And now that I'm a manager, I can just look at Josh or Patrick, or I used to look at Victor and say, hey, do this for me. But the point is that if you're willing to put the time and effort into this, you can become an expert at this. If you're like our little Reddit guy that we saw earlier, you'll never get anywhere with this attitude. But just a little attention and passion at this, and you can go quite far. Now, the question comes up a lot of times, do I need a cert? Do you need a cert to be a pen tester? We've got the CompTIA Security Plus, we've got EC Council stuff, we've got the OSCP from Offensive Security, SANS has got all their certs, and then there's probably about a half a dozen other certifications out there. And do you need it? And the answer is maybe. You might. A lot of organizations, for example, the Department of Defense Directive 8140 requires that you have at least some of the EC Council certifications so that you can demonstrate different levels of competency. Are they going to make you a better pen tester? Probably not. But the job requires it. Same with the CISSP. What is the CISSP? It's about an inch deep and a mile wide when it comes to security. And if you have a CISSP like I do, does this make you a better pen tester? Hell no. But it does let me be things like a PCI QSA, PA QSA. It would allow me to get certain jobs in the organization, in the field, because the enterprise asks for them. Now, a lot of times you could negotiate this. You could say, hey, look, I don't have the CISSP, but if you hire me, I promise to get it within 6 months. And some organizations are willing to do that. So I don't dismiss certifications. I think about most of my guys don't have them, and some of them do, and that's great. Really, for me, it's what you can do in our org, but don't dismiss them because many companies and organizations will require them. So, in addition to the mechanical aspects of hacking and pen testing, there are those other skills that you need to have, the soft skills. So if we remember that list we went through that wasn't about discovery, enumeration, vulnerability assessment, and so forth, these are where the soft skills come in. Writing, communication, appearance when you're working with clients, professionalism, and then curiosity and passion is a soft skill that you definitely have to have here. So let's talk about communication. My boss says, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And his point of this is maybe to tell me to shut up. But the other point is that communication starts with listening. That's the most important part. And if you need to improve your listening skills, stop talking. Speak less. Don't interrupt somebody. When they're talking and you know the answer, you're almost already there. You've already got their question completely done, and you want to go ahead and give the answer real quick. It's really tempting to kind of jump in and interrupt them, but the fact is, then you're not listening. Wait for the entire question. Try and keep eye contact. I know that's difficult for some of us, but it's an active part of listening so that you can see the emotional content that they're delivering, not just the words. And then focus on the message. Try not to get tied up in anything it makes you feel. A lot of times, if you're working with a sysadmin and you've just told him that something's broken, he's coming back at you with his defense or something else, and you might get wrapped up in wanting to defend yourself or argue with him, and you just got to say, no, you know what? I'm going to focus on the message, wait for him to get done, and then we'll continue going. And then, adopt the beginner's mindset. Just because you're a pen tester doesn't mean you know everything, and there are times when in our communication between us and the client, we may dismiss them because, hey, they just don't get it. I'm the pen tester, I got this. They just don't know. And that can interfere with your ability to really communicate with the people that you're trying to articulate risks with. Now, you may find yourself in situations where you have to speak in front of audiences or work with small groups of clients, or even within if you're working internally on a red team, there may be a small group that you have to sell an idea to. So if you're not comfortable speaking in front of people, there's different things that you can do. I mean, the first thing you need to do is practice. Just practice, practice, practice. And there are different ways to do that. If you want to be able to get up in front of everyone and talk, you could join Toastmasters, which is an organization that does nothing but constant public speaking. Or you could do something simpler. If you're part of a religious organization and you all meet on Sundays, you might volunteer to read from the book. And that's still an opportunity to put yourself out there and speak in front of a group so that you feel better about the process and you're not as uncomfortable. And the other part of communication is writing. And some of us are really good at it and some of us aren't. But there are a lot of resources on the web where you can go to improve that. If you're familiar with the website Coursera.com, this is a website that provides us with access to university-level classes. And if you go to Coursera.org and search for writing, there's about a half a dozen different university classes that you can take that will improve your professional writing, personal writing, and so forth. And all of this, again, is free. So there's no reason that we can't find the resources and the opportunities to improve our communication skills. Now, appearance. The black hoodie. Can we please stop the black hoodie? The black hoodie and the black fingernail paint and all of this is not something that I can put in front of a banker. And it may impact your professional credibility, let's face it. Now, there's a point where in your career, you may get to a point where you don't care anymore and they can't argue with you because you are an expert. But if you're just breaking into it and you walk into the office after you've been hired in the whole hacker persona with the hoodie and you shut off the lights and you sit there hacking, you're not going to be very successful in the career. Please stop. Let's go ahead and consider this to be a social engineering engagement, right? So if we're working with bankers, let's dress like bankers. Let's, duel and duet. I think we were hearing in the previous talk about mirroring the people that we are socially attacking, and let's consider that. So let's play the role that we've been put into and get rid of this hacker persona, because I don't think it's benefiting us in any way, shape, or form. Professionalism. So what is professionalism? Well, it can be little things, like being prompt and showing up to the meeting on time. And that can be a real challenge, because you might have been working overnight and you just went to bed at 6, and there's a real temptation to say, screw it, they don't know I was up all night, and they give me this meeting at 8 a.m., and, sometimes we just have to do that. And we have to be prepared. So showing up is one thing, but showing up prepared for the meeting is the other. We need to see that. And when you're new, oftentimes you're a little scattered and you need to kind of not slow down a little bit and make sure that you've got everything you need before you walk in the room or get on the phone. Professionalism also means being confident without being cocky. Now, this is one I struggle with a great deal, because it's real easy to go over that edge of being confident to being cocky. And the reason I do it is because I'm either out of my depth or I'm faking it. And I've gone from being confident to cocky. And it's just something that I'll work on. But it happens with a lot of the people I work with, and a lot of the new guys that come in aren't quite sure how to do it. So just be aware that this can be a problem. Organizational skills, if you're new, I got to tell you, you're going to be working with a lot of evidence. One of the things that we do as part of the penetration test is we document our observations in a way that we can reproduce what we did 6 months later. And if you're unable to do that, that could be a problem for you and for your business in case something goes pear-shaped, and 6 months later you're called to testify. And that happens. So you need to be organized, you need to keep all of your evidence together, and that'll also help you succeed professionally as well. Professionalism also means maintaining your poise. Customers, both internal and external, aren't always the happiest people in the world. Sometimes you're going to do something like knock over a server or lock out every single user during a password test, and they're going to come at you with both barrels flaming. And you need to take it. You need to maintain your poise, maintain your calm and your center, and work through the problem without pushing back. And that takes practice as well. But that's part of being accountable. When you screw up, saying, yeah, you know what, I screwed up. And if I'm a professional, I'm accountable and I'm willing to accept my mistakes. And I'll also be honest and have integrity. Because as pen testers, I think that's critical. We're going to see things, a lot of things. We're going to have access to a lot of information, millions of credit cards, for example. My team, on a regular basis, has access to millions and millions of dollars worth of credit cards. And if one of them decided to go rogue, that would be bad. And the same thing is for, PII and, IP. We're going to have access to things that, we can't share with other people, and we have to have that integrity to keep it to ourselves. Now, the last soft skill is something that I can't teach you. And it's either one of those things you either have or you don't. But it's probably the number one characteristic of a successful pen tester. It's that curiosity. There's passion, that's good, but curiosity, I think, is number one. I mean, if you're ever walking through this hotel and looking at a network jack going, I wonder where that goes. I wonder what I can do with it. Or you look at a problem, and CTF or otherwise, and think, this is a puzzle, and I need to solve this. That's that curiosity. That's that spark. And if you've got that, you'll be a great pen tester. If you don't, and if you're looking for a 9-to-5 job where you're not having to work at this constantly, then, maybe go into forensics or some other cybersecurity sort of field, because perhaps pen testing isn't for you. All right, so I get this a lot. I can't get a job unless I have experience. I can't get experience unless I get a job. And that's the common catch-22, right? Especially when you're new and you're breaking into a new field. Well, it's time to get creative. So let me tell you something. When I first started into computers, I used to make eyeglasses for a living. I didn't have a lot of money for computer equipment. I had 3 little children and just me, and I couldn't figure out how to get the money up for the MCSE, because back in the day, that was the thing you had to get. Everybody was getting their MCSEs. I know, paper MCSEs were all crap, but I still wanted it, and I wanted to do it, but I couldn't. So I got this crazy-ass idea. I went to the school district, and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to businesses. I'm going to ask for their old equipment. I'm going to fix it up, and I'm going to donate it to the schools. All I need is a place to work and a place to store it. And they went, yeah, great. And I had my picture in the paper, small town, Napa. And it was a big deal for a little while, and I was doing this. And then they came to me and they said, hey, we've got a better idea. Why don't you do this as an adult education class, and you can teach adults how to do this? I had no idea, but I said, sure, why not? And I started teaching adults how to do this. And over about 3 years or so, I got enough experience doing this to go and get a job as a sysadmin. And actually, I got a job at a value-added reseller and did some sales and did some implementation and had a lot of fun. But it was that, you know what, let's make this stuff up as we go, sort of get creative, that got me in. And we can do the same thing as pen testers. Now, some of the ways you could do that would be to volunteer. If you look around at this conference, there are lots of volunteers here, and some of them have, strong careers in security and in pen testing. Why not volunteer at a B-Sides or DerbyCon or DEF CON, or get involved in one of these conferences as a volunteer? Are you going to get immediate experience as a pen tester? Hell no, but you're going to meet a lot of pen testers. And you're going to be able to network, and you're going to be able to have the opportunity to familiarize yourself with different people in the industry. And that's huge. And get involved with Hackers for Charity. I mean, that could be some direct work where you're actually doing some technical volunteering. And then there's a website called www.catchafire.org that will set up volunteers with different organizations. And if you do a search on it, the last time I looked, there was an organization that was looking for somebody to do a cybersecurity analysis of their network. And they were looking for a volunteer to do it. So again, there may be some opportunities there where you could go to the school district in your town, or you could go to a local business or whatever and say, hi, I'm a student in cybersecurity. I'd like to test your website for free, or I'm doing this, and I'd like to take a look at your network at no charge, your school, your church, wherever. Look for an opportunity to volunteer, get involved, and that may give you some real-world experience. Now, bug bounties. Here's an idea. Now, bug bounties are a very good way for me as a hiring manager to determine whether or not your skill sets are valuable enough when you haven't had another job. So here's the idea. If somebody has been willing to pay you for a vulnerability that you found in their website, those are key indicators for me that tell me that, A, you were able to follow the rules of the bug bounty. So you can follow rules of engagement, because if you screw up in one of those, they won't pay you. And you can produce actionable results because you had to then document it in a way that they understood and they could verify. This is not a bad idea in terms of being able to demonstrate that you have some skills without having a job. So you don't have to quit your day job to be able to prove that you can pen test. Now, I put Pornhub up on here because they have a new bug bounty and I thought it would be funny, and if I'm honest, I went for a little bit of shock value, right? But I'm beginning to see some reports on Twitter that suggest perhaps their bug bounty program is not as professional and above board as we thought. So I take it back. You take a look at it, but be careful out there. Now, mentorship. Here's an idea. Now, mentorship can be a fast track to understanding our industry. Now, to find a good mentor, what I suggest is you look around at the people. Maybe you're volunteering at these conferences like we talked about earlier. You're going to see a lot of folks. Find somebody that's got a successful career, that has something that you'd like to have, you'd like to emulate, and see if they would be willing to be your mentor. I mean, they can help you cut through all the crap so you can learn from their mistakes and you can kind of leverage their experience, and you can be successful that much faster. But they're not going to tell you how to hack. You're going to have to work for it. Mentors aren't there just to give you all the answers. They are there typically, it's a relationship to help guide you professionally, not necessarily give you, the tips and tricks on how to hack, although they may do it. But don't abuse your mentors and make sure that you're doing the work first before you go to them with the questions. Now, here's something I want to talk about. I want to talk about the concept of your personal brand, who you are. It's very easy now for us to put our brand out on the internet, from Facebook to Twitter to all of the different forums and so forth. What I want to warn you that you don't want to mix your conference persona with your professional persona. This will come back to bite you in the ass every single time. Remember, you are what you tweet. If you post racist comments or post pictures displaying questionable judgment, you're putting your career at risk. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever. So I was doing some research on HostAPD. Are you familiar with the software package for doing some, man-in-the-middle attacks against wireless? And I was having some trouble, and I was looking at this forum, and there was this guy in the forum replying to every answer with some abusive, unhelpful, or derogatory sort of comment. I mean, he clearly did know. I looked back at his profile. He really did know his shit, and he was senior and had been posting for a gazillion years. But his answers were all incredibly unhelpful. Now, if he had come to me and was trying to get hired on a job, and I look back at that, I'd have taken his resume and just put it at the bottom of the pile. I don't need prima donnas. I don't need people with bad attitudes. It's not about that. This is a community where we've been helping each other for a long time. I understand the concept of the OSCP, try harder, and I get that. But don't be a dick about it. Some people will come to me and go, and I have issues. Yeah, well, we all have issues. We're all kind of special. This is something unique about our industry, that most of us, or a lot of us, will have social awkwardness or obsessively focused interests or poor communication skills. And there was, quite some time there's been the debate about, is that why we're successful? Is it our industry creates that, or are we drawn to it like moths to a flame? And I've met a lot of brilliant yet broken people with all sorts of issues. And you know what? It's okay. We're all a bit broken. And even the normal folk are broken. It's just not as obvious. What you can do, however, is make your challenges your strengths. So if you're awkward in social situations, don't like making eye contact, then you know what? Don't take a consultant's gig. Get something in the back room. where you don't have to work with a team. Maybe you can work independently. There are a lot of jobs in the industry. And just because we might be a little different and a little uncomfortable where normal people might be, it's not a problem. It will not stop us from being successful in our careers. Let's look at your resume real quick. This is pretty much, when you're new, about all your resume should have. If you still have that objective section at the top of your resume, get rid of it. I know what your objective is. You want to be a pen tester. Everybody knows that. Let's get rid of that. Use a summary section instead. Maybe the top 4 bullet points, the highlights of your career, or what you're really good at, whatever you want me to understand about you immediately. But get rid of the objective. And get rid of bullshit terms like you're a people person, or a team player, or a problem solver, or you have excellent communication skills. No, you don't. These are fluff words that really don't bring anything to it. I want to know what you can do. I want to know what your skills are. If you're new, push that education and certifications section if you have it. Put in whatever work experience that you were able to pull together. If you were able to leverage the opportunity in a current position, for example, to do more cybersecurity, put that in your resume. Volunteer, whatever. And then lastly, in your skill sections, stop putting in things that you were just in the room for. You've got those like, well, I know how to do, 2012 R2 Active Directory. Not really, but I was around a guy that knew how to do 2012 R2. And you get a lot of that on the resume, and you might be able to get through like the recruiter with that shit, but once you start getting to the people who know better, you're going to get called out on it. So just put in what you know. Be confident with what you have. Now, the interview process is going to go a little bit like this. You're going to have a phone screen with a recruiter. They're going to ask you some technical questions that they have no understanding of, but somebody wrote them down for you. If you can't answer the question, do me a favor. Look up the answer so that when we go to do the technical interview, I can tell you if you got past the recruiter but you couldn't answer 1 or 2 questions, I'm going to ask you those questions in the technical interview because I want to see whether or not you learn from your mistakes. Now, that you could have in the technical interview a verbal, a written, or a practical. Pray for a practical. If you're new and you want to get into this, the practical is the best way to demonstrate your skills when you don't have job experience. You may have the opportunity to provide writing samples. If you haven't written up a pen test report from one of your exercises, do that because you can have something to deliver to them. Also, consider going back to your personal brand and making sure that you're doing professional blogging because this will demonstrate your expertise as well as your writing skills. And then you may have a cultural interview with somebody who's just going to look at you for the fit and it's going to be more casual. They may ask you some, well, how is it, working independently and some ethics questions, but really it's just to see whether or not you can join the team. And then finally you're going to have that final face-to-face interview and the negotiation of your salary. So now you're a pen tester. Good job. Way to go. Now, where are you going to screw up? You're new at this, and it happens. And there's a few things that are pretty common in new pen testers. I'm going to tell you about them now so you can avoid them. So the first one is, I call it goes to 11. It's where you've got a vulnerability and the organization or the people you've told about it aren't getting it. And they just don't understand why it's a big deal. And you're getting worked up because it's a big deal and they need to fix it and they just don't understand and it's a problem. And calm down. There are, bigger things at play many times. The organization gets to choose whether or not they want to fix it. At the end of the day, it's up to them. But one of the things I want you to do is take a step back. If your client or your stakeholder isn't understanding, then the problem may be with the way that you're articulating the risk. So come at it at a different angle. Think about what's important to them. Are they about the money? Well, then describe how this could be about money and how it could cost them. Come at it at a slightly different angle so that you can align what your message is with what their interests are. The other problem is saying yes when you really mean no. So when you're like, yeah, no, I can do that. No, that's perfect. Yeah, totally. No, I got this. It's all good. And the nodding of the head yes, when inside you're thinking to yourself, haven't a clue, I'm just going to figure this out later. Please don't do this. You get to a point where you're kind of reaching outside your comfort zone, and that's okay, but if you're way too far out, in our industry, we can possibly break things. And even when you've got some time under your belt, you can get to a point where you're afraid to ask for help. I've never had a hacker's handle. I've never been cool, and I got mine today. And it's called Master Chown. And it comes from the experience I had at a client where I was trying to move some files over that I didn't have permissions to move. And I went and thought to myself, well, I'll just change the permissions. I'll use Chown and do whatever. And I ended up not really knowing. And I was afraid to call anybody on my team or to ask for help. And I ended up instead changing the permissions, not of just those files, but absolutely everything on the web server. And that server went down, and it was 2 days of trying to figure out how to change permissions back and what they all were, and it was pretty embarrassing. And that's now my cool hacker handle, Master Chown. So I will always remember that even when you've been doing this for a long time, you still need to ask for help. And finally, making mistakes, you're gonna make them. It's just a fact of life. So when that happens, just own up to it quickly. I'd rather somebody say, hey, I screwed up, and this is how I figured out so it'll never happen again, and then, cool, that's fine, and then we can move on. See, the problem is that their learning is a process, and there are 4 stages for learning anything. The stages of competence, right? And the most dangerous part when you're new is that you're in this stage of unconscious incompetence, meaning you don't know what you don't know. And you're there, and you're just kind of flailing about a little bit, and then you move to the next stage where now you're conscious incompetence. Now you know you're missing some stuff, and you know what that is, and you can go fix it. And then you fixed it in your conscious competence, and yeah, you know it. You may have to look at your notes or Google something, but you're pretty good at it. And you're okay. And then there's the unconscious competence, where you're like that senior pen tester where you just rock and you can do it off the top of your head. Well, the learning process, when you're new, you're going to spend a lot of time in unconscious incompetence. This is your most dangerous time. But eventually, you're just going to be in this cycle of conscious incompetence through unconscious competence, where you're going to get really good and then you're going to rock, but our industry changes so much. You're going to discover something that you don't know about, and then you're going to get that urge to go figure it out again, and you're going to move through that cycle over and over. And that's probably one of the most exciting things for me in this job, is that there's always something that I can learn and something I can do differently. And eventually, I know that if I put the time and energy into this career, I will be successful at it. And once I'm successful, I think it's important for us to give back. We are standing on the shoulders of people that went before us. I didn't write Metasploit. I didn't learn about NBNS and LLM&R because I was, Spider Labs and Responder and all of these other tools and techniques that we have available were freely given to us for the most part. And I think it's important for us as we succeed and as we get better to go ahead and give back. No prima donnas. We need to be willing to teach, and we need to make sure that we're not that guy in the forum being a total pain in the ass. So you've been a pen tester for a while. So what's next? Well, I got some sad news for you. Probably management. If you want to advance, there's a couple of different ways that you can go as a pen tester. You can go into management. It's not all that bad. But the other thing you could do is be an owner or founder of your own organization. A lot of people who have excelled in our industry do that. You can always try the job hopping and hop around from company to company for a while and see whether or not that makes you successful. At some point, that will probably be detrimental, because we'll start to look at your resume and go 6 months here, a year there, 9 months there. Guy's not going to be with us for very long. I'm not going to invest in you. So maybe this isn't a good match. I mean, really, the key to making more money is pretty easy. So pen testing has a fixed cost, right? I can only bill X number of dollars to a client per hour for the work that you do. So your salary is basically defined as your value to the company. And that value can be defined as your billable hours. So then you can only bill so many hours in a week, and I can only bill the client so many hours in a week, and therefore I can only pay you so much in a week. Or your value could also be associated by the improvements you make to the overall company brand. So maybe you're doing talks at conferences, or you're doing a great number of blog posts, or you're creating tools, or you're mentoring the less senior individuals on the team. Now you've changed your value from just a pure billable, what you can crank out, to what intrinsic value you bring to the rest of the organization and to the company brand. And that's a reason to be able to go and ask for the raise. Say, hey, I'm now more valuable to you. But basically, you will hit a point where it's either management or you're going to have to figure out something else to do. And there's a lot for us to do in cybersecurity, let's face it. So we can do any one of these things in the list. Forensics looks really interesting to me because it's got a real strong tie-in with the pen testing. So I like the concept of red team versus blue team, maybe working together, doing a little. I don't know where we're going to be. And I hate that question of where do we see ourselves in 5 years, but we've got to ask ourselves that and be prepared for it. So I think if we follow some of these basic steps, I think it's relatively easy for us to be able to go from the new guy with the passion to the guy in the seat hacking the enterprise and being successful at it. Now, I know you guys have got questions, so who wants to go first? Yes, sir.
Difference is that you have the people with education that don't have it, and then be not extend. And I was wondering, as far as your experience, do you rely heavily on the abilities, or their success in the technical portion of the interview? Or?
They can tend to, they may not be really good interviewers, they may be exceptional interviewers, it depends upon the guy you've chosen, but doing the technical interview with one of your own pen testers, they can generally get a sense of the guy on the other end, whether or not he speaks the same language. So there's some value there. I think there's another opportunity in as a hiring manager that if you've got one of your own guys interviewing a potential candidate, they're more likely to sell the potential candidate on the company that the candidate's coming to work for. They're successful, they're happy. If there's any questions from the candidate, they're more likely to answer them in a positive way than the recruiter could, or even a management level sort of. And I typically rely on. I face it. I hired them because they're good. I can rely on them to do a fantastic job in the field, and I typically rely on them to be able to be a good judge of someone else's technical expertise. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What is with all the pen testers using Macs?
Our use of Macs was because our company, one of the first engagements we did was with Apple. So I guess during the sales process, they all walked in with a combination of HPs and Dells, sat down at the table, and everybody else had Macs. And in that moment, they went, holy crap, this isn't going to work. And they went out and bought Macs, and we've been a Mac shop ever since. Some of the advantages for me is that typically I can plug this into a customer network, and if there's a problem on their network, I won't come home with it. If it infects one of my VMs, it's easy for me to wipe out. It also tends to be a comfort level for the customer as well. Oh, you've got a Mac. Okay, that's fine. There's not a lot that you can do to my network. So then I think developers, there are some pretty good development tools. Again, we already said I'm not a programmer, so I couldn't tell you, but I know a lot of people. Yeah, Adrian, you got to.
If you have like two VMs running at the same time, screen switching components, and you find any of OS.
There you go.
Last point. Testers travel a lot. Mac travels really well. And get beat up in airport as much as some other places.
I've dented mine a lot because they're all made out of aluminum. Yeah, and I end up kind of smashing and denting them, and I've actually gone through 3 hard drives, and I have to get this in now for its 3rd trackpad, and the battery's dying, and I'm either exceptionally hard on my equipment, or I've just had a lemon for the last 3 years. Yeah, it's the Pornhub. Any other questions? Yes, sir. It's that enthusiasm in their voice. It's that excitement when they're talking about a particular issue. It's you ask them questions, and whether or not they give it an interesting, thoughtful answer, or whether or not it's something just wrote out of the book. Yes, sir.
So say you got all the technical skills.
Yeah.
But not a good community of security in your area. What would you recommend someone do?
Well, you could start a community. There's no reason why you couldn't start a little hackers chapter. Like I said, you do got to get creative. There might be some online resources that you can go to, IRC and others that would be something. You can look to see if there's a B-sides anywhere close to your community. Any sort of maker spots. Even a chapter of tool that can be useful to try and find similarly minded individuals who might want to get together on a irregular basis to talk shop. Any other questions? You guys have been a great audience. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.